I've learned never to argue with someone holding a knife, especially when they're smiling. So I let him think I was weak. I let him think he'd won. I let him cancel my promotion with that patronizing smirk, telling me I wasn't ready for strategic leadership while sitting in the office I'd practically built. 3 weeks later, he lost the company $1.2 million. And the beautiful part? I never had to lift a finger. Sometimes the best revenge isn't pulling the trigger. It's handing them the gun and watching them point it at their own foot. My name is Natalie Cross, and I've spent the last 5 years turning data into gold for Virelia Dynamics. At 35, I'd already outlasted 3 reorganizations, 2 mergers, and more strategic pivots than I could count. From my corner office on the 7th floor in downtown Raleigh, I could see the research triangle spread out like a circuit board. All those tech companies humming with ambition and backstabbing in equal measure. Virelia wasn't the biggest player in financial data systems, but we were aggressive, hungry, the kind of company that attracted sharks who mistook ruthlessness for leadership. I'd learned to swim with them, even when the water turned bloody. For 18 months, I'd been rebuilding our entire data analytics infrastructure from scratch. Not because anyone asked me to. God knows the C-suite couldn't spell API if their stock options depended on it. But because I saw what was coming. Financial institutions were hemorrhaging money on outdated systems, and whoever could offer them real-time, AI-driven insights would own the next decade. My official title was Senior Data Strategist. But titles meant nothing here. What mattered was that when our biggest clients called panicking about regulatory compliance or market analysis, they asked for me by name. When our developers hit a wall, they came to my office. When the CEO needed someone to explain why we were burning through our AWS budget, I was the one drawing diagrams on his whiteboard. The director position had been vacant for 6 months, our last one. Rodriguez had taken a job at Goldman Sachs, and they'd been conducting a thorough search ever since. Everyone knew it was mine. Hell, I'd been doing the job already, just without the salary or the equity that came with it. I'd grown up in a nothing town in Colorado, where the biggest employer was a distribution center for a company that sold knockoff outdoor gear. My parents still didn't understand what I did for a living. Something with computers, my mother would tell her friends, as if I were fixing printers instead of designing systems that moved billions of dollars through the digital pipes of the global economy. That small-town background had taught me patience, though. How to smile when people underestimated you. How to work twice as hard for half the recognition. How to play the long game when everyone else was focused on quarterly earnings. The expansion into the Eastern markets was my baby. I'd identified the opportunity, built the partnerships, trained the teams. We were 3 weeks from launching when HR started dropping hints about organizational changes and bringing in specialized expertise. I should have seen it coming when they started using phrases like cultural fit and leadership presence. In my experience, those words were just corporate speak for, we're about to screw someone over. The morning I met Derek Vaughn, I knew exactly what kind of man he was. Handshake too firm, voice too loud. That particular brand of confidence that comes from never having to prove yourself. He wore a Patek Philippe watch that cost more than most people's cars and kept checking his phone during our introduction like I was keeping him from something more important. Heard great things about your work, he said, already looking past me toward the conference room where the real players sat. Looking forward to leveraging your expertise. Leveraging, like I was a tool in his toolkit. Not the architect of the entire system he'd been brought in to oversee. But I smiled, shook his hand, welcomed him to the team. Because in this world, the moment you show your cards is the moment you lose the game. And I'd been playing this game longer than Derek Vaughn knew it existed. The email came on a Tuesday. Strategic planning meeting, confidential, from Helen in HR. 2 p. Executive conference room. Required attendees, Natalie Cross, Derek Vaughn, Helen Martinez. I knew what was coming before I walked through that door. It's funny how corporations think they're being subtle when they're actually transparent as glass. The sympathetic look from my assistant. The way Derek had been avoiding eye contact all week. The fact that Helen had brought tissues to a strategic planning meeting. Derek sat at the head of the table, my usual spot during director-level meetings. Power play number 1. Helen fidgeted with her folder, unable to meet my eyes. Power play number 2. Bring HR as a witness. Make it official. Make it feel inevitable. Natalie. Derek started, leaning back in his chair like we were about to discuss the weather. First, I want to say how much we value your contributions to Verelia. He'd been here 3 weeks, and already it was, Your technical expertise is unquestionable, he continued, that practiced executive smile never wavering. But after careful consideration of the department's strategic needs, we've decided to reassess the director position requirements. I kept my expression neutral, counting my breaths, 4 in, 4 out. A technique I'd learned during my first year in tech, when I'd watched mediocre men fail upward while I debugged their code at midnight. I don't understand, I said, though I understood perfectly. The position requirements were written based on the role I've been performing for the past 6 months. Derek shifted forward, his Stanford MBA practically gleaming in the fluorescent lights. You've done admirable work at the operational level, truly. But director-level leadership requires a different skill set. Strategic vision, executive presence, the ability to interface with C-suite stakeholders and board members. Interface, like I hadn't been presenting to the board quarterly for the past 2 years. With respect, I said, keeping my voice level. I designed the entire Eastern expansion strategy. I've managed the team, secured the partnerships, delivered every milestone. Exactly, Derek interrupted, his tone patronizing enough to peel paint. You're irreplaceable in your current role. We need you focused on execution, not distracted by administrative responsibilities. Think of it as playing to your strengths. Helen finally spoke up, reading from her script. Your compensation will be reviewed to reflect your valuable contributions. We're prepared to offer a 15% raise, effective next quarter. A bribe? They were canceling my promotion and offering me a bribe to smile about it. Additionally, Derek added, I'll be establishing a new position, Associate Director of Technical Operations. It would report directly to me, of course, but it would give you more visibility into strategic decisions. Associate Director. A made-up title that meant nothing. Report to him on work I'd been doing independently for years. Visibility into decisions I should be making myself. I looked between them, these 2 people who'd decided my future in some closed-door meeting I wasn't invited to. Derek, with his imported confidence and network connections. Helen, just following orders. Probably hating herself for it, but not enough to speak up. I appreciate the offer, I said, standing slowly, gathering my phone and notebook with deliberate calm. I'll need some time to consider it. Derek's smile widened, mistaking my composure for submission. Of course, take the week. But Natalie? He leaned forward, dropping his voice like he was sharing wisdom. Sometimes the best career move isn't up. It's deeper into your core competencies. You're brilliant at what you do. Why complicate that with politics and bureaucracy? I wanted to laugh. Politics and bureaucracy. I'd navigated more corporate landmines than he'd ever see from his nepotism-padded perch. But I just nodded, gave them both a professional smile. You're right, I said, heading for the door. I am brilliant at what I do. Helen called after me, something about an open-door policy and supporting my career growth. Derek was already checking his phone before I'd even left the room. Probably messaging his golf buddies about how he'd streamlined the organization, or some other LinkedIn-ready garbage. Walking back to my office, I passed the wall of awards and recognitions. My name was on half of them. Innovation Award 2022. Excellence in Data Strategy 2023. Team Leader of the Year 2024. Soon, Derek's name would probably replace mine on the next round of accolades, taking credit for systems I'd built and strategies I'd designed. But that was fine. Let him have the spotlight. Let him think he'd won. Because Derek Vaughn had just made the kind of mistake that ends careers. He'd underestimated someone who knew the system better than he ever would. Someone who understood that in the world of data, one misplaced decimal could cost millions. One overlooked variable could trigger a cascade of failures. And I knew exactly which variables Derek Vaughan would overlook. That night, I did what I always did when I needed to think clearly. I researched, not in the office where digital footprints could be tracked, but at home with a glass of wine and my personal laptop. Derek Vaughan's LinkedIn profile read like a greatest hits album of corporate buzzwords. Transformational leader, change catalyst, strategic visionary. Deeper digging revealed the truth. 3 companies in 7 years. Always brought in as a consultant or interim director. Always gone within 18 months. His last position at Meridian Tech had ended abruptly. Pursuing new opportunities was the official line. But Glassdoor reviews from former employees painted a different picture. Took credit for others' work. Made decisions without understanding technical implications. More concerned with appearances than results. Perfect. The next morning, I arrived early and sent Derek an email. After reflection, I'd be honored to support your vision for the department. Please let me know how I can help ensure a smooth transition. His response came within minutes, probably typed one-handed while he hit golf balls at the country club. Excellent decision, Natalie. Team player attitude like yours is what makes Virelia great. Team player. I printed that email and filed it away. Over the next 2 weeks, I became Derek's most valuable asset. When he struggled to understand our data architecture during client calls, I jumped in with helpful clarifications. When he mixed up API endpoints during a technical review, I discreetly corrected him without making him look foolish. I was supportive, deferential, indispensable, and I was taking notes. Derek, I discovered, had a fatal flaw that went beyond mere incompetence. He was allergic to appearing ignorant. Rather than ask questions or admit uncertainty, he'd bluff his way through conversations, making commitments based on half-understood concepts. In meetings, he'd hear terms like machine learning optimization and predictive analytics, and assume they were interchangeable magic bullets that could solve any problem. The opportunity presented itself during the quarterly planning session. Derek announced his revolutionary initiative, integrating advanced AI into our client-facing analytics platform. The board loved it. AI was the buzzword that made stock prices jump and investors swoon. Natalie will lead the technical implementation, Derek announced, gesturing magnanimously in my direction. Since she's our resident expert on the current system architecture, I'd be happy to help, I said, noting how he'd positioned it. I would do the work. He would take the credit. Though implementing AI at this scale comes with significant challenges, data validation, bias correction, regulatory compliance, details. Derek waved dismissively. That's why we have you. I'm confident you can handle the tactical elements while I focus on the strategic vision. Strategic vision. He didn't even know what questions to ask, let alone how to envision answers. I assembled a small team of junior developers, bright kids, eager to please, but green enough that they wouldn't question Derek's decisions. Then I carefully structured the project so that Derek would have to sign off on every major decision. I documented everything, CCing him on technical specifications he wouldn't read, requiring his approval on architectural choices he couldn't understand. I want to ensure you have full visibility, I told him during our one-on-one. This is your initiative. You should have final say on all critical decisions. His ego ate it up. Exactly right. I need to own this completely. I started feeding him options, always presenting them in pairs. The correct approach, usually conservative, tested, safe, and an aggressive alternative that sounded impressive but carried hidden risks. I'd explain both, using just enough technical jargon to make his eyes glaze over. Then add something like, of course, the second option would really showcase innovation leadership. He chose the aggressive option every time. When our senior architect, Marcus, raised concerns about data validation protocols, I scheduled him to meet with Derek directly. Marcus spent 30 minutes explaining why rushing the AI integration without proper testing could lead to cascading errors in financial predictions. Derek smiled, nodded, and afterward told me Marcus was too conservative and stuck in old paradigms. Should I address his concerns? I asked, innocently. I'll handle it, Derek said. We need people who think bigger. Marcus requested a transfer to another team the next week. I approved it immediately. Per Derek's instruction to remove obstacles to innovation. Our most experienced architect, gone. Another variable removed from Derek's equation. I assigned his replacement, Jessica, fresh from a coding boot camp, thrilled to work on such a high-profile project. She wouldn't know enough to spot the gaps Marcus would have caught. The beauty of my approach was its perfect legitimacy. I wasn't sabotaging anything. I was following Derek's direct orders, implementing his vision, supporting his leadership. If anyone asked, and they would, I had emails, meeting notes, approval chains, all showing that I'd raised concerns and Derek had overruled them. 3 weeks before launch, I sent one final email to Derek, CCing no one. Per our discussion, moving forward with the accelerated timeline despite incomplete validation protocols. Please confirm you're comfortable with the risk assessment I've attached. He responded within 2 minutes. Confirmed. Full speed ahead. He hadn't opened the attachment. The metadata would show that later. When it mattered. I smiled at my screen, then got back to work. After all, I had an AI system to deliver. Exactly as specified, exactly as approved, exactly as Derek Vaughn had demanded. The first warning sign came from Jessica during a Thursday afternoon stand-up. She was presenting the latest test results, her voice bright with the enthusiasm of someone who didn't know what danger looked like in spreadsheet form. The AI model is returning predictions with 94% confidence ratings, she announced proudly, way above our target threshold. Derek beamed from his spot at the head of the conference table. Excellent, see? This is what happens when we push boundaries. I studied the numbers on her screen. The confidence ratings were too uniform, too consistent across wildly different datasets. Any experienced developer would recognize the pattern. The AI was overfitting, making predictions based on noise rather than signal. But Jessica didn't know that, and Derek wouldn't understand it if she did. Interesting results, I said carefully. Should we run validation against historical data to confirm accuracy? Derek's jaw tightened. We've discussed this. Natalie. Analysis paralysis kills innovation. The model is performing above expectations. We proceed. I nodded, making a note in my project log. Proceeding per Derek's directive. Skipping historical validation phase. 2 of the junior developers exchanged glances. They were starting to sense something was off, but neither had the experience or courage to speak up. Why would they? Derek had made it clear that questioning the project meant questioning him. The following week, our beta client, Thornfield Capital, started feeding real data through the system. They were a mid-sized hedge fund, eager to get an edge through early adoption of our revolutionary AI analytics. Derek had personally promised their CEO that we would transform their decision-making process. The first reports looked impressive. Clean visualizations, confident predictions, executive-ready dashboards that made complex market dynamics look simple. Too simple, actually. The AI was smoothing out volatility indicators, treating market anomalies as noise to be filtered rather than signals to be analyzed. I documented everything in our compliance system, a practice I'd started years ago that had saved the company from several regulatory issues. Each report got filed with a timestamp and a note. Generated per current parameters approved by D. Vaughn. Small breadcrumbs that would matter later. Marcus's replacement, Jessica, came to my office on a Tuesday, laptop in hand, worry creasing her young face. Natalie, I'm seeing some weird patterns in the sector correlation analyses. The AI is showing inverse relationships that don't make historical sense. She was right. The model was identifying patterns that didn't exist, creating phantom correlations that would lead to exactly the wrong investment decisions. A competent director would have hit the emergency brake immediately. Have you raised this with Derek? I asked. I tried. He said I was overthinking it, that the AI sees patterns humans can't. I leaned back, choosing my words carefully. Document your concerns in writing. Send them to Derek with your specific findings. It's important we maintain clear communication channels. She looked uncertain. Won't that make him angry? Following proper protocol is never wrong, I said. We're all on the same team here. Jessica sent the email that afternoon. Derek's response, which he CC'd to me, was a masterpiece of dangerous ignorance. The entire point of AI is to transcend human limitations. Trust the technology. By week 2 of the beta, Thornfield was making significant trades based on our predictions. They were seeing initial gains. The market was in a general upswing, and even broken clocks are right twice a day. Derek started sending victory lap emails to the C-suite, highlighting the early success. Game-changing performance, he wrote. Thornfield, seeing 3% gains in positions guided by our AI recommendations. What he didn't mention, what he didn't understand, was that those gains were coming from conventional positions any trader would have taken. The AI's unique recommendations, the ones based on its phantom patterns, hadn't been tested with significant capital yet. I forwarded Derek's email to compliance with a simple note. For your records, not a warning, not an alarm, just documentation. The senior compliance officer, Robert, called me an hour later. Natalie, should I be concerned about something? I'm just ensuring we maintain proper documentation of the beta phase, I said evenly. Derek is very thorough about tracking our success metrics. Robert was too experienced not to hear what I wasn't saying. I see. And the risk assessments? All signed off by Derek personally. Would you like copies? That would be helpful. For our files. The third week started with Thornfield's traders fully trusting the system. They'd moved from testing with small positions to committing serious capital based on the AI's recommendations. Monday morning, the AI identified what it called a high-confidence arbitrage opportunity in emerging market currencies. Jessica brought it to me immediately. This can't be right. It's predicting the Brazilian real will strengthen against the dollar by 7% despite the central bank announcing potential rate cuts. She was learning fast. Too bad it was too late. What does Derek say? I asked. He already approved it. Told Thornfield it was exactly the kind of contrarian insight AI provides. I pulled up the communication thread. There it was. Derek's message to Thornfield's CEO. Our AI has identified a significant opportunity that traditional analysis would miss. This is why you partnered with us, to see around corners. I added it to my compliance folder. Then I sent Derek one final email, my last attempt to fulfill my duty of care. Derek, the emerging markets prediction shows significant deviation from all fundamental indicators. Recommend additional review before client acts on this information. His response came quickly. Already discussed with client. They're moving forward. Focus on your technical tasks, not portfolio strategy. Portfolio strategy. The man didn't even know what a yield curve was, but he was making portfolio strategy decisions. I locked my computer, walked to the break room, and made myself a cup of tea. From the window, I could see storm clouds gathering over the research triangle. How appropriate. The countdown had started, not by my hand, but by Derek's hubris. All I'd done was build exactly what he'd asked for, approved what he'd demanded, documented what he'd decided. The rest would be physics, or in this case, economics. Gravity works the same way in both. What goes up without support inevitably comes crashing down. The collapse started at 9:47 a.m. on a Wednesday. I was reviewing deployment logs when my phone buzzed with a Bloomberg alert. Brazilian real plunges 12% following central bank emergency rate cut. The exact opposite of what our AI had predicted. The exact opposite of what Derek had promised Thornfield Capital. Within minutes, my email exploded. The first was from Thornfield's head of trading, marked urgent in red. Critical issue, position down 400K and falling. Require immediate explanation. Then came Derek, his usual corporate polish cracking. "Natalie, my office now." I took my time walking over, bringing my laptop and a folder of printed emails. Derek was pacing behind his desk, his face the color of expensive salmon. Two other monitors showed cascading red numbers, Thornfield's positions hemorrhaging value in real time. "What the hell happened?" he snapped before I'd even sat down. "The AI model performed exactly as configured," I said calmly. "It identified patterns based on the parameters you approved." "Don't give me that technical bullshit. You built this system." "I built it according to your specifications. You explicitly instructed me to skip the historical validation phase. You overruled concerns about correlation anomalies. You told the team to trust the technology." His phone rang. The CEO. Derek's hand shook as he answered. "Yes, sir. Minor calibration issue." "No. The system is—" "I understand." "Yes, sir." He hung up and stared at me. "Fix it, now." "Fix what, exactly? The model is working as designed. The issue isn't technical, it's that the model was pushed to production without proper testing protocols. I don't care what the issue is, make it stop." But it was too late to stop. Thornfield had gone all in on 3 other AI recommendations that morning, all based on the same flawed pattern recognition. By noon, their losses had passed $750,000. The emergency meeting was called for 2 p.m. C-suite, legal, compliance, and risk management. Derek tried to bar me from attending, but the CEO overruled him. "We need someone who actually understands what happened." The conference room felt like a tribunal. Our CEO, Margaret Chen, sat at the head of the table with the controlled fury of someone watching their company's reputation dissolve. The chief legal officer had 3 assistants taking notes. Robert from compliance had brought my documentation folder, 3 inches thick. "Explain," Margaret said simply. Derek launched into a frantic word salad about innovation and calculated risks and market volatility. Margaret let him run for exactly 90 seconds before cutting him off. I asked for an explanation, not excuses. "Natalie?" I opened my laptop and pulled up the system architecture. The AI model was configured to identify patterns with minimal historical validation. This was a deliberate choice to accelerate deployment. The model began detecting correlations in market noise, essentially seeing faces in clouds. These false patterns became the basis for its predictions. "Who authorized skipping validation?" the CLO asked. I pulled out the printed emails. I raised concerns about validation on 6 separate occasions. Each time, Derek overruled them. Here's his written approval to proceed without historical testing. Here's his instruction to trust the technology when anomalies were identified. Here's his message to Thornfield, promising contrarian insights. Derek's face had gone from salmon to ash. You set me up." "I followed your direct orders," I said evenly. "Every decision was yours. I simply ensured they were documented." Margaret turned to Robert. "Compliance perspective?" Robert opened my folder. Natalie filed comprehensive documentation throughout the project. Every risk was identified and reported to Derek. He acknowledged and dismissed each one in writing. The room fell silent except for the sound of the CLO's pen scratching notes. By 4 p.m., Thornfield's losses had hit $1.2 million. They'd tried to exit their positions, but the market had turned against them. The Brazilian real continued its plunge. The other positions the AI had recommended were bleeding value. Thornfield's CEO called Margaret directly. I heard about it later from her assistant. 30 minutes of threats about lawsuits, regulatory complaints, and public exposure. Our reputation in the financial tech space was evaporating in real time. Derek was escorted from the building at 5:15 p.m. Security stood by while he packed his office, the Patek Philippe watch looking absurd on the wrist of a man carrying a cardboard box of personal items. He stopped at my door on his way out, his eyes wild with rage and disbelief. "You did this," he hissed. "No," I replied quietly. "You did this. I just made sure everyone would know it." He wanted to say more. I could see the words building behind his teeth. But security was waiting, and his corporate career was already over. Derek Vaughan, the transformational leader, the strategic visionary, reduced to a cautionary tale about the dangers of promoting beyond competence. The next morning, Margaret called me to her office. The storm had passed, but the damage was extensive. Thornfield would need to be compensated. Regulatory inquiries would need to be managed. The AI project would need to be completely rebuilt, properly this time. The board has some questions about your role in this, she said carefully. I met her gaze steadily. I documented everything because I've been in this industry long enough to know what happens when things go wrong. Someone needs to be blamed. I made sure it would be the person actually responsible. Margaret studied me for a long moment. You could have stopped this. Could I? Every attempt I made to raise concerns was shut down. Derek made it clear that questioning him meant being labeled as not a team player or resistant to innovation. I did exactly what he hired me to do: execute his vision. She leaned back, a slight smile playing at her lips. Remind me never to underestimate you. Most people do, I said. Derek was hardly the first. The cleanup would take months. Thornfield would get their money back, plus penalties. Our reputation would need careful rehabilitation. But Derek Vaughan would never work in fintech again. Word travels fast when you lose $1.2 million through sheer arrogance. And the director position? Well, someone would need to lead the rebuild. Someone who understood the technology. Someone who'd proven they could navigate corporate politics while maintaining technical excellence. Someone who'd been ready all along. The emergency assessment meeting was scheduled for Friday morning. Just me, Margaret, the full board via video conference, and our external auditors from Deloitte. They'd been brought in to perform an independent review of the disaster, standard corporate theater to show shareholders we were taking things seriously. I arrived with 3 tablets and a stack of printed documentation organized chronologically. Every email, every meeting note, every system log. The auditors had requested raw data, and I was prepared to give them exactly that. Ms. Cross, the lead auditor began, walk us through your involvement in the AI implementation. For the next 2 hours, I laid out everything, not with emotion or editorial commentary, just facts, timestamps, and evidence. I showed them Jessica's concerns about correlation anomalies, Marcus's resignation letter citing irreconcilable differences in risk assessment, my 6 documented attempts to implement validation protocols. This email here, I pulled up Derek's response to my final warning, shows that I explicitly informed Mr. Vaughan about the emerging markets prediction error 12 hours before Thornfield acted on it. One of the board members, an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, interrupted. You're telling us you knew this would fail? I knew there were critical flaws that needed addressing. Whether it would fail depended entirely on whether those flaws were fixed. Derek chose not to fix them. But you could have escalated beyond Derek, she pressed. I pulled up another email. I did. This is my message to Robert in compliance, flagging potential issues. However, as Derek repeatedly reminded me, he had full authority over the project. Escalating further would have been insubordination. The auditors exchanged glances. They'd seen this before. Competent employees trapped under incompetent leadership, documenting everything because they knew how the story would end. Margaret spoke up. The board needs to understand how we prevent this in the future. I'd been waiting for this opening. The problem wasn't just Derek, it was the system that put him in charge despite his lack of technical qualifications. How many board members actually understood what AI implementation entails when they approved his appointment? Uncomfortable silence. We need technical leadership making technical decisions, I continued. Not MBAs who think buzzwords are strategies. The silver-haired board member leaned forward. What would you have done differently? 3-phase implementation with kill switches at each phase, mandatory historical validation before any client beta, a technical review board with veto power over production deployments, and most importantly, listening to the people who actually understand the technology. That sounds expensive, another board member commented. $1.2 million expensive? I asked. Plus, legal fees, reputation damage, and regulatory fines. Point taken. The auditors presented their preliminary findings that afternoon. The phrase systematic failure of leadership appeared 17 times. Derek's name appeared 43 times, always followed by words like overruled, dismissed, or ignored. My name appeared with phrases like documented concerns, proposed safeguards, and attempted intervention. Margaret called me back to her office at 4 p.m. This time, the board was present in person. They'd flown in from New York, San Francisco, London, a sure sign that serious decisions were being made. Natalie, Margaret began, the board has reached some conclusions. First, we owe you an apology. You were put in an impossible position. I remained silent. Apologies were cheap. What mattered was what came next. Second, we're restructuring the entire technology division. We need someone who understands both the technical and business implications of our systems. Someone with a proven track record of risk assessment. The silver-haired board member spoke up. We're offering you the position of interim director, effective immediately. Interim. There it was, the corporate hedge, not a full commitment, just a placeholder while they searched for another Derek with better credentials and worse instincts. I appreciate the offer, I said slowly, but I have conditions. Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly. Most people would have grabbed the offer immediately. First, I want full authority to restructure the team. That means hiring, firing, and promoting based on competence, not connections. Second, I want a technical review board with real power, not an advisory committee that can be ignored. Third, I want Jessica Chen promoted to senior developer. She showed more insight as a junior than Derek did as director. That's quite a list, one of the board members said. You just lost $1.2 million because someone's ego was bigger than their expertise, I replied. You can have my list, or you can have another Derek. Your choice. They exchanged glances. The silver-haired woman smiled slightly. And fourth? I hadn't mentioned a fourth, but she was sharp. Fourth, the word interim gets removed after 90 days if I meet the recovery metrics we established today. You're negotiating pretty hard for someone who just helped cost us over $1 million, another board member said. I didn't cost you anything. I tried to save you from losing it. There's a difference between being unable to stop a disaster and causing one. Derek caused it. I just made sure you'd know who to blame. Margaret looked around the room, reading faces. All in favor? One by one, hands went up. Even the skeptical board member eventually raised his. Congratulations, Director Cross? Margaret said. Interim director, for now. As I shook hands with each board member, I thought about Derek. Probably at home polishing his resume, trying to spin disaster into opportunity. He'd blame me, of course. Tell anyone who'd listen that I'd sabotaged him, set him up to fail. He'd be right, in a way. I had set him up. Set him up to reveal exactly who he was, a man who valued appearance over competence, ego over expertise, speed over safety. I'd simply given him enough rope and documented how he chose to use it. The silver-haired board member lingered as others filed out. You played this perfectly, she said quietly. I didn't play anything. I just did my job. She smiled. Exactly. Perfectly. Monday morning, I walked into the 7th floor as interim director. Same building, same elevator, but everything felt different. The assistant who'd given me sympathetic looks during Derek's reign now stood up straighter when I passed. The developers who'd been too scared to speak up were already waiting in my new office, Derek's old office, with lists of everything that needed fixing. First things first, I announced at the all-hands meeting. We're going to rebuild this properly. No shortcuts, no buzzword-driven development, no pushing to production without validation. If anyone has a problem with that approach, HR can help you update your resume. Nobody moved. They were still shell-shocked from Derek's implosion. waiting to see if I was real or just another talking suit. "Jessica," I called out. "Stand up." She looked terrified, probably thinking she was about to be scapegoated for the disaster. "Everyone." Jessica identified 3 critical flaws in the AI model before it went live. She documented them, raised them through proper channels, and was ignored. That takes courage. As of today, she's our new senior developer and will lead the rebuild team. Jessica's mouth fell open. Around her, developers started nodding, some even clapping. They recognized competence being rewarded for once. "Marcus," I continued, "I know you transferred to another team, but I'd like you to consider coming back as lead architect. We need someone who understands risk assessment." Marcus, who'd been standing in the back, stepped forward. "Only if my concerns go directly to you, not through layers of management." "Deal. Your first task is designing those kill switches I mentioned to the board." Over the next week, I systematically dismantled Derek's entire structure. The yes-men he'd been cultivating were reassigned to roles where they couldn't do damage. The bootcamp graduates he'd hired for their enthusiasm over experience were paired with senior mentors. The external consultants charging us $500 an hour to validate Derek's bad ideas were shown the door. But the real revenge wasn't in the restructuring, it was in the small things. Derek's wall of innovation, a display of meaningless awards and PR photos, became a timeline of the disaster, showing exactly how ignoring expertise led to failure. His daily 9 a.m. strategy alignment meetings became optional technical workshops where people actually learned something. His executive parking spot was converted to Employee of the Month parking. First recipient, Jessica. Word traveled fast in the Triangle Tech community. Within 2 weeks, I received 3 different calls from recruiters checking in about Derek's availability for their clients. Each time, I was scrupulously professional. Derek is a visionary leader with strong opinions about innovation, I'd say. He's particularly confident in his ability to make technical decisions quickly. It sounded like praise. It was actually a warning that anyone in tech would understand. He doesn't listen, and he'll destroy your systems. Thursday afternoon, Robert from Compliance stopped by with news. Thornfield's accepting our settlement offer. Full reimbursement plus a 20% penalty. They're also willing to continue as clients if we can guarantee Derek's completely gone and won't be replaced by another non-technical executive. "Put it in writing," I said. "The part about technical leadership, I want it in the contract." He grinned. "Already did." The board insisted. That evening, I was working late when my phone buzzed. A LinkedIn notification. Derek had updated his profile. Accomplished technology executive seeking transformational leadership opportunities, specialized in AI implementation and rapid innovation deployment. I almost laughed. Then I saw he'd listed me as a reference. The audacity should have made me angry. Instead, I felt something closer to pity. He still didn't understand what had happened. In his mind, he was a victim of office politics, not a casualty of his own incompetence. My phone rang. Unknown number. But I recognized the area code, San Francisco. "Miss Cross? This is Tom Bradley from Nexus Ventures. Derek Vaughn listed you as a reference. He's applying for our Director of Innovation position." Nexus Ventures. They'd just raised $50 million in Series B funding. Perfect. "Derek is unforgettable," I said carefully. His impact on our organization was immediate and profound. In just 3 weeks, he transformed how we think about technology implementation. All true, every word. Would you recommend him for a technical leadership role? I think Derek would bring to your organization exactly what he brought to ours. You'd see similar results, I'm sure. That's very helpful. Thank you. He hung up, probably to call the other references. Robert from Compliance. Margaret. The Thornfield. CEO. Each would give similarly careful, technically truthful references that would sound like praise to someone not listening carefully. Friday marked 1 month since Derek's termination. The AI system had been completely rebuilt with Marcus's kill switches and Jessica's validation protocols. We were running a new beta with a smaller client. showing them exactly what the system could and couldn't do. They loved the transparency. Margaret called me to her office that afternoon. The board's impressed, you've stabilized the team, fixed the technology, and retained Thornfield. They're ready to remove interim from your title. Actually, I said, I'd like to keep it for the full 90 days. I want to earn it properly, not get it because of a crisis. She studied me. You really did plan all of this, didn't you? I planned for Derek to fail. I didn't plan the specific failure. He managed that all on his own. I just made sure when he fell, he wouldn't take anyone else with him. Except himself. Especially himself. As I walked back to my office, my proper office now, not inherited from someone else's failure, I passed the award wall. My name was back on the plaques. But I'd added something new. A framed printout of Derek's email saying I wasn't ready for strategic leadership. Underneath, I'd added a small placard. Strategic leadership is knowing when not to lead. Every morning, I looked at it and smiled. Not because I'd won, that was never in doubt once Derek showed his hand, but because somewhere out there, Derek was probably in another interview, selling another company on his transformational leadership, having learned absolutely nothing. And that, more than anything else, was the perfect revenge. Not destroying him myself, but letting him remain exactly who he was, a man who would destroy himself over and over again, in every opportunity he was given, forever blaming others for the disasters he created. 3 months later, the interim was officially removed from my title. No fanfare, no big announcement. Margaret simply updated the organizational chart and sent a brief email to all staff. That was how I wanted it. The real announcement had been made through actions, not words. I stood in my office that evening, watching the research triangle light up as the sun set. The same view Derek had enjoyed for 3 disastrous weeks. But now it meant something different. Every light represented a company, a team. People doing real work, not performing corporate theater. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You destroyed my career. Derek. Somehow he'd gotten my personal number. I typed back. No, I documented it. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I could have been great there. You were exactly who you were, I replied. I just made sure everyone could see it. No response. There never would be. Men like Derek didn't learn from failure. They just found new audiences for the same performance. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Jessica stood there with Marcus and the rest of the team, champagne bottles in hand. Thought we should celebrate, Jessica said. The Thornfield AI system just passed its 6-month stability test. 0 critical errors. We gathered in the break room, the same space where I'd made tea while Derek's world collapsed. Someone had brought a cake with strategic leadership written in icing. An inside joke that would follow me for years. Speech, Marcus called out, raising his glass. I looked around at these people, brilliant, dedicated, undervalued until now. They deserved the truth. 6 months ago, I sat in a room while someone who'd been here 3 weeks told me I wasn't ready for strategic leadership. He said I was too focused on execution, too deep in the technical details to see the big picture. He was half right. I was focused on execution. Specifically, executing a plan to let him hang himself with his own rope. Nervous laughter rippled through the room. But here's what Derek never understood. Strategic leadership isn't about vision statements and buzzwords. It's about knowing when to act and when to wait, when to speak up and when to document quietly, when to fight and when to let your enemy defeat himself. I raised my glass. You all showed courage when it mattered. You raised concerns, documented issues, protected our clients even when leadership told you not to. That's real strategic thinking. So this toast isn't for me, it's for you. The ones who actually built the systems, who understood the risks, who cared more about doing right than looking right. We drank. We laughed. We told war stories about the Derek era that already seemed like ancient history. But as the celebration wound down, I found myself back at my desk, typing one final report. It was addressed to the board, copying Margaret. The subject line read, Lessons Learned and Recommendations for Preventing Future Leadership Failures. In it, I detailed not just what went wrong with Derek, but the systemic issues that allowed him to be hired in the first place. The bias toward confident presentation over proven competence, the assumption that MBA credentials meant understanding of technical systems, the dangerous myth that disruption was always positive. But I also included something else, a proposal for a new leadership development program. One that would identify technical talent early and train them in the business skills they needed, rather than hiring business people and hoping they'd figure out the technology. We don't need more Derek Vaughns, I wrote in my conclusion. We need leaders who understand that in a technical company, technical knowledge isn't optional, it's fundamental. Leaders who know that sometimes the most strategic decision is admitting what you don't know and listening to those who do. I hit send at midnight, then shut down my computer. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new projects, new people convinced they could fake expertise in systems they didn't understand. But that was tomorrow's battle. Tonight, I'd won the war I'd been fighting since that Tuesday afternoon when Derek told me I wasn't strategic enough. The war against the epidemic of confident incompetence that plagued corporate America. I hadn't won it everywhere, just here, in this one company, in this one moment. As I locked my office, my earned office, not my inherited one, I thought about that opening line I'd mentally written months ago. I've learned never to argue with someone holding a knife, especially when they're smiling. Derek had been holding the knife when he canceled my promotion, smiling that practiced executive smile. He thought he was cutting my throat. Instead, he'd handed me the weapon I needed. Because in the corporate world, the most dangerous knife isn't the one pointed at you, it's the one you document, timestamp, and file with compliance while your enemy waves it around, convinced it makes him powerful. I let Derek think he'd won. I let him think I was weak. I let him cancel my promotion with that patronizing smile. And then I let him discover what strategic leadership really looked like, standing back while someone else pays the price for their own arrogance, with receipts to prove exactly who was responsible. The parking garage was nearly empty as I walked to my car. Not Derek's old executive spot, just a regular space I'd kept even after the promotion. Some symbols of power matter. Others are just parking spaces. My phone buzzed one last time. An alert from LinkedIn. Derek Vaughn has updated his employment status to seeking new opportunities, open to relocation. Still seeking, 6 months later. Word travels fast in tech circles. Faster when you've lost $1.2 million in 3 weeks. I drove home through the quiet streets of Raleigh, thinking about my parents back in Colorado. They still didn't really understand what I did, but they understood this. Their daughter had won, not by fighting, but by being smarter than the person trying to hold her down. That small-town patience had served me well. The long game always beats the quick win. Documentation always beats rhetoric. And competence, real competence, always reveals itself, just as incompetence does. Derek had thought he was playing chess while I was playing checkers. He never realized I wasn't playing at all. I was just taking notes. And in the end, those notes were worth more than his Patek Philippe, his Stanford MBA, and his transformational leadership combined. They were worth the truth. The truth that got me my promotion, saved my company from worse disasters, and ensured Derek Vaughn would never destroy another team with his confident ignorance. I'd let him cancel my promotion. Then I'd let him cancel his own career. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate justice, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts or similar experiences. Have you ever dealt with a Derek in your workplace? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more stories like this one.